In the closing years of the 19th century, something quiet was stirring in the hearts of ordinary people. The old world was changing fast. Factories were rising, cities were swelling. And in the middle of all that noise, a strange new idea began to spread. An idea that would eventually reach millions of people who had never met each other, who lived on different continents, in different centuries of their own lives. The idea was simple, almost dangerously simple, that your thoughts are not just reactions to your life, they are the architects of it. 3 people in 3 very different corners of the world would each discover this truth in their own way. One would build it into an entire church. One would preach it to 5,000 people at a time in the heart of New York City. And one, a quiet illustrator who had already lived a whole life before she ever wrote a word of philosophy, would turn it into a small book that is still changing lives 100 years later. This is the story of Charles Fillmore, Emmet Fox, and Florence Scovel Shinn. To understand these 3 teachers, you have to understand the world that made room for them. By the late 1800s, many people in America and Europe were quietly stepping away from the rigid religion of their grandparents. They still believed in God. They still wanted meaning. But they were tired of being told to simply endure suffering and wait for reward in the next life. Out of that hunger came a movement historians would later call New Thought, a loose but powerful belief that the mind itself held creative power. That prayer was not just pleading with a distant God, but aligning your own thinking with a divine order already present within you. It was in this atmosphere, hopeful, searching, a little rebellious, that our 3 teachers would each find their calling. Charles Fillmore. Our story begins in the wild, half-tamed territory of Minnesota, where a boy named Charles Fillmore was born in 1854. He did not have an easy childhood. At the age of 10, an ice skating accident shattered his hip, leaving him with pain and disability that would follow him for years. Formal schooling was thin on the ground in frontier Minnesota, but Charles found his own education anyway, reading Shakespeare, Tennyson, and Emerson by whatever light he could find. He grew into a restless young man, trying his hand at nearly every trade available on the American frontier before finally settling into real estate in Kansas City, Missouri. On the surface, it looked like an unremarkable life. Then came Myrtle. Charles married Myrtle Page in 1881, and together they would stumble into something neither of them expected. Myrtle had suffered for years with tuberculosis, a diagnosis that at the time was often a quiet death sentence. In 1886, the couple attended a series of New Thought classes, and Myrtle began repeating a simple, radical phrase to herself, that she was a child of God, and therefore did not inherit sickness. She recovered. Charles watched this happen to his own wife, and it cracked something open in him. Soon his own old hip injury began to improve as he embraced the same philosophy. Together, in 1889, the couple founded what would become Unity, a movement built on the conviction that prayer, affirmation, and right thinking could heal both body and circumstance. Unity grew from a small Kansas City prayer group into Unity Village, a sprawling spiritual campus that still operates today, generations after Charles Fillmore's death in 1948. He was, by any measure, an unlikely mystic, a man with little formal education who nonetheless left behind a body of teaching that continues to shape spiritual thought. Emmet Fox. Across the Atlantic in Ireland, a very different kind of childhood was unfolding. Emmet Fox was born in 1886 to a family with a long Catholic tradition. His father was a physician and a member of Parliament, but he died before Fox turned 10, leaving the boy to be shaped largely by the rigorous, disciplined education of the Jesuits at Stamford Hill College near London. Fox trained as an electrical engineer, a career built on precision, logic, and hard measurable fact. It seems an unlikely foundation for a spiritual teacher. And yet perhaps that is exactly what gave his later teaching its clarity. Fox did not deal in vague mysticism. He explained metaphysical ideas the way an engineer explains a circuit, cleanly, logically, step by step. In his late teens, he discovered something in himself, an unexplainable capacity for healing, and it sent him searching into the world of New Thought. He studied the work of Thomas Troward, attended the founding meeting of the International New Thought Alliance in London in 1914, and finally, in 1928, delivered his first New Thought lecture at Mortimer Hall. Soon after, he crossed the ocean to America. In 1931, he took the pulpit of a Divine Science church in New York City. And there, during the darkest years of the Great Depression, something remarkable happened. People came, not by the dozens, but by the thousands. At his peak, Fox filled the New York Hippodrome with as many as 5,500 people each week, later moving to Carnegie Hall itself. Think about that for a moment. In a city gripped by economic despair, a former electrical engineer was filling one of the largest halls in New York with people desperate to hear a simple message, that their thinking could change their circumstances. His book, The Sermon on the Mount, would go on to reach millions of readers. And in one of history's quieter connections, it became deeply influential in the early recovery meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, whose members found in Fox's clear, practical spirituality something they could actually use. Florence Scovel Shinn, and then there's Florence. Unlike Fillmore and Fox, Florence Scovel Shinn did not begin her life searching for spiritual truth. She began it as an artist. Trained as an illustrator, she built a genuinely successful career in commercial art, her work appearing in magazines and books during a period when few women achieved that kind of professional recognition. She lived what looked from the outside like a full and accomplished life, long before philosophy ever entered the picture. But life has a way of leading people toward their real purpose through the back door. Somewhere along the way, Florence found her way into the New Thought community, studying at Unity, the very institution Charles Fillmore had built, and absorbing its central teaching, that the spoken word carries creative power. What made Florence different from the two men who came before her was not the substance of her belief, but the way she delivered it. Where Fox reasoned like an engineer and Fillmore built an institution, Florence told stories. Her most famous book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, published in 1925, reads less like a sermon and more like a conversation with a wise friend, full of everyday anecdotes about ordinary people whose fortunes shifted the moment they changed their words and their thinking. It was a small book. It did not fill Carnegie Hall, but it has quietly outlived generations of readers, still being discovered today by people who have never heard of Unity or divine science, but who find in Florence's plain, warm voice something that speaks directly to them. We've met three remarkable people: a frontier boy from Minnesota who rebuilt his broken body through prayer, an Irish engineer who filled Carnegie Hall with people hungry for hope, and a successful illustrator who found, almost by accident, that her plain, warm words could change lives, Now let's look at what actually connected them and what set each of them apart. Strip away the differences in personality and circumstance, and you find three teachers standing on the very same foundation. All three believed the Bible was never meant to be read only as history. To Fillmore, Fox, and Florence, its stories were maps of the inner life. Moses, the Promised Land, even Jesus himself, were symbols of a journey every person makes within their own mind. All three placed enormous weight on the spoken word, not as decoration, not as wishful thinking, but as an actual creative force. Fillmore called it affirmation. Fox called it the discipline of right thinking. Florence called it simply the game of life. The idea that your words are moves on a board, and the board always responds. And all three arrived at the same radical conclusion, that circumstances are not fixed, that a body can heal, that a fortune can turn, that a life can be rebuilt, not through luck, but through a disciplined change in what a person believes and says about themselves. It's worth pausing on how unusual this was for its time. These were not miracle workers claiming supernatural power. They were ordinary people, insisting that transformation was available to anyone willing to change their inner conversation. But if you place their teachings side by side, the differences are just as telling as the similarities. Charles Fillmore was above all a builder. He didn't just want to teach an idea. He wanted to build something that would outlast him. Unity became an institution with its own publishing house, its own prayer ministry, its own village. His legacy is organizational as much as philosophical. Emmet Fox was a communicator first. His background in engineering shows in every page he wrote, logical, structured, almost mathematical, in how he broke down spiritual ideas into steps anyone could follow. He built no lasting institution of his own. His legacy lives entirely in his words and in the enormous crowds he once commanded in person. And Florence Scovel Shinn was in many ways the most intimate of the three. She built no church, gave no famous sermons to thousands. Her gift was tone, the sense that she was speaking directly to one reader at a time, using small, specific, true-to-life stories rather than grand theology. Where Fox reasoned and Fillmore organized, Florence simply talked to you the way a wise friend would over a cup of tea. Here's what's remarkable. None of the three could have predicted where their ideas would travel. Charles Fillmore's unity still stands today, generations after his death, still teaching the same core message from the same Kansas City ground he once stood on. Emmet Fox's plain-spoken writing found an audience he likely never imagined. Early members of Alcoholics Anonymous, who found in his clarity something they could hold on to in their darkest moments. His influence quietly threads through a recovery movement that has since helped millions. And Florence Scovel Shinn's small book, written nearly 100 years ago by a woman who spent half her life as an illustrator rather than a philosopher, continues to be discovered by new readers every single day. Readers who have never heard of unity or divine science or the New Thought movement at all, but who find in her simple words exactly what they needed to hear. 3 lives, 3 very different paths, one enduring idea that the way you think and the way you speak quietly shapes the way you live.